aliens, UFOs, and all the above, gang. When we thought we heard it all, we haven't. You feel me? Today I got an episode from Mayim Bialik, one of the greatest podcasts ever in the world. But before we jump into that, I need you to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and share this video if you can, gang, if you don't mind, because we finna dive deep.
We have to rethink religion and we have to rethink aliens. I didn't believe in UFOs. Once I started to look at the data, I started to meet people who were part of a government program that we now know about.
But guess what? There's more.
I've been to the Vatican archives. I started to see the similarities.
Dr. Diana Walsh Pasulka, professor of religious studies, examines the connection between ancient religions and modern-day UFO experiences, where thousands of years of religious texts actually describing alien encounters.
I went to Catholic archives and I looked at reports of souls from purgatory. This got me interested in looking at alien abduction and modern-day reports of UFOs.
People who are now experiencing things that might sound a lot like the descriptions in many of these religious texts.
There is something within the human body that responds to the practice of prayer. It actually changes the brain. Within the Catholic tradition, a very sophisticated history and theology of non-human intelligence.
Is the Vatican withholding information?
There are probably a lot of things out there that we're going to be surprised by.
Why are you still using bots for your meeting? How else am I going to remember what happened? Just use granola.
Hi, I'm Mayim Bialik.
And I'm Jonathan Cohen.
And welcome to our breakdown.
Today, we're digging into the world of religious studies and how it connects to the modern day experience of UFOs and non-human intelligence.
And before you think another episode about aliens, what? We're going to be broadening the conversation to include the entire course of history as we know it. We're going to ask the question why UFO sightings seem to increase at historically significant times, as well as the possibility that ancient religious texts prophesized current world events.
We're going to look for those hints through the history of religious texts, understanding that angel sightings might actually have been an experience people are having with non-local consciousness.
What are the things that we allowed other people to tell us was the framework for reality? And have there always been hints that there is something outside of the plane of consciousness that we think we're operating in that might indicate that alien sightings, UFOs, and even government disclosure might be part of a much larger plan? One of my favorite parts of this episode includes a conversation about technology. Is it a new religion? Is it the Antichrist? And how can we fit in our understanding of advances in technology with our advances in understanding experiences that we may not yet be able to explain? Our guest is Dr. Diana Walsh Pasulka. She's a professor of religious studies at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. She's the author of so many books, but her most recent is The Others: UFOs, AI, and the Secret Forces Guiding Human Destiny. We have so much to talk to Dr. Pasulka about, and this is a conversation that really hits on our own personal theory of everything. It's a pleasure to welcome to the breakdown Dr. Diana Walsh Pasulka. Break it down.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
You're one of those people who has information in so many arenas that intersect into so many things that Jonathan and I are curious about and that our audience is curious about. I wonder if you can sort of give us a framework for, I guess, what you believe is your unique ability to communicate regarding, in particular, things that are outside of what we would consider reality or the reality we know.
Yeah, sure. So I've been studying religion for a long time. I decided I wanted to study religion when I was 11. And so I did actually grew up and have a PhD in religious studies, where we don't, by the way, advocate for a particular religion. We study religion academically. So I just want to be clear about that. So I say that if I were to bring a unique perspective to media and technology, which is what I've focused on in my work, and the history of Catholicism, I would say that I look at the ways in which the things that we see inform our belief and behaviors about religion. So the things that we see, let me give you an example. So we are now our infrastructure. So how does the infrastructure and the technological infrastructure impact what we believe and how we see even? So that takes us to back even to Plato and Socrates. Socrates gave the first that we know of, the first actual criticism of externalizing memory. And that was because writing was a new technology for him. This is how I describe it to my students. So Socrates was living in,
Now, when she explained it like that, like she just said, writing is a new technology, that hit quite different to me. I ain't gonna lie, because I never heard nobody explain it that way, that writing is a new technology, you know? That's quite different. And in a sense, we can look at it like that. Writing is a technology, you know? The way you write or the way you put things down on paper is another way to, inform someone of something, or another way to make a statement, or another way to create an order or a gesture. At the end of the day, writing and words, are all in a sense a spell at that token. So I can understand why Plato's, looked at that as a new technology, kind of in a sense, because hey, yo, like with this new written technology, with this language that we are now putting down on paper, we can make things happen without words. Now we can make things happen and take place without using any verbal communication. That's different. That's different.
Ancient Greece in Athens. And during the time of his life, the new technology of writing was taking off. So in a sense, it was like Silicon Valley in the 1990s. There was like, all these young guys were like really excited about writing and what it could do for them and how they can monetize it. So they were really interested in monetizing it. And Socrates said, whoa, this might be bad. Bad things might happen to us. And the kinds of things that he described are interesting because they're happening today. So when we look at technology, AI, and these kinds of things, we see the trials that are happening, the AI trials. We see that there's a lot of damage that comes about when the infrastructure shifts to a new technological substrate. And so writing was definitely that, and that was ancient. Human beings changed. Socrates predicted how they would change. They would externalize. He didn't use the word externalization of memory, but if you read Phaedrus is where he talks about this dialogue. In fact, his students started to, instead of writing like we write, like books and treatises and stuff, they wrote in dialogue in order to preserve an oral tradition. And so you can even see that there. They didn't want to have their brains and their bodies completely changed by writing. So I look at the history of technologies and I see the kinds of shifts in the way we see reality, not just how reality shifts. Maybe reality never shifts, but the way we interpret reality shifts through new technological infrastructures. And I've been doing this for a long time. So I grew up in California, not far from Silicon Valley. And my group of my cohort was in California, was one of the first to adopt computers. So I had a computer in the 8th grade. We were being beta tested, right? So they were like, I wonder how this new technology will impact kids. So we were there. So that's my unique perspective, I would say.
I got one challenge for you. Try Whisper Flow one time, and I promise you'll understand why I haven't typed a full sentence.
I wonder if you can give us a little bit of a framework just from, an academic perspective of what the purpose of religion is, in the same way that we might ask, what's the purpose of science fiction? What is the purpose of the stories that we tell, the framework that we give to it, and how does truth come into that equation?
Okay, that's a great question. So the functions of religion. So again, when
I was thinking that also. Hey, gang, I was thinking the very same thing. I said, that is a goddamn great question, because at the end of the day, what is the purpose of all of this? What's ever been the purpose of any of this? You know, I don't. I always wanted to know, what was the purpose of language? What was the purpose of the words? What is the real purpose? You know what I'm saying? Like, can we get a drum roll? Because a lot of things that's taking place around us right now in the world, we don't know the purpose for it. We just utilize it because they told us to. We just utilize it because they told us. I hate to say it that way. I hate to say it that way, but it is what it is. We don't know. Look, we using their languages, we using their words, we using their sentences, going to their hospitals, their courts, using their doctors, their lawyers. You know, only reason we use it because we got no other choice. At least that's what we believe. But we got another choice. My thing is, what was the purpose of religion? What was the purpose of, telling us, hey, yo, believe in God, believe in that there's a heaven and hell, believe in this, that, and the other. What was that purpose? Do anybody know? Can anybody out there tell me before she dive into it and give us the answer? You know what I'm saying? If you got the answer, comment in the comment section. If you don't, then let's go.
when I have, students who are freshmen, they come in, they take one of my intro classes, and they say, I ask them, what do you think religion does? What's religion about? Like, why does it seem that every culture has a form of religion? Let's talk about that. So I give them the whole class to come up with, their ideas about what religion is. And I write a lot of those things down on the board. What recurs, if you look at different religions, let's take Buddhism, Hinduism, Islam, Christianity, what recurs across these religions? And one of the things they write down is there's the discipline of prayer. There's a type of prayer. In Islam, it's like 5 times a day. In Judaism, there's a whole day of prayer called Shabbat or Sabbath.
Jews pray 3 times a day. The Sabbath is a day of rest, which involves prayer, but we actually have prayer services, also every day in Judaism. But yeah, I understand what you're saying. There's different sort of manifestations of the way that prayer makes its way into the function of religion.
Yeah, but if it's a universal pattern within religion, why are people doing it? So one of the things that we show is that it helps people. By the way, we can only say this today because we have science. And so certain scientists are looking at brain activity that happens when people are either meditating or praying. And it appears that there are certain portions of the brain that light up when people pray or meditate. So we can say, and it actually changes the brain. So there is something within the human body that responds to the practice of prayer. So I think that religion has evolved, and we haven't gotten rid of it for a lot of different reasons, one of which to keep this practice of prayer because it's very important. And my work looks at now at why that's important. And so that's one of the functions of religion.
When we think about the thousands of years, let's say, that we have, like the Judeo-Christian text and that sort of thing, the notion is, here's the answer to explain all of your questions, right? Here's a source of comfort.
I think that a lot of people assume that about religion. So we have a lot of assumptions about religion, that it answers our questions and this, it gives us comfort. but it doesn't. So if you go back into the actual biblical text, say, take the book of Job, that's a book that talks about suffering. Okay, so Job is a good guy. He's like perfect, right? But yet he suffers horribly. And so his friends come around and they say, well, you must have offended God in some way. And so they go through, but no, he hasn't. So the question remains, why do good people suffer? Which, by the way, you can see this is a question in almost every major religious tradition, like traditional religion. All right, so the question then persists in the book of Job until a young man, Elihu, comes along and he basically says, who are you guys to question God? Like, we don't know why you suffer. God knows, and we cannot know because whatever God is incomprehensible to us. And then in order to restate that, God shows up at the end of the book and restates, yes, it is a truth that you guys weren't here in the beginning of the world. Of course, I'm paraphrasing. And, you can't know what I do or why I do it. So in many religious traditions, once you actually lose your assumptions about them and go back and when I'm saying lose your assumptions about them, their whole lives. So those assumptions are not easily dismissed. So even if you happen to be a practicing Jew or a practicing Christian, when we go back and we look at the text, the actual biblical text with fresh eyes, we begin to see that those kinds of things, they're destabilized. Our assumptions are destabilized, which is good.
Mind Bialik's breakdown is supported by Surfshark.
Most people like.
She definitely had good points. I gotta give her that. Plus, she's a doctor. She knows what she does best, right? She great at what she do. And at the end of the day, I love the way she's breaking it down. And even more so, I love the questions that Mayim Bialik and Jonathan is asking also, because without these type of questions, we can't receive these type of answers. You understand what I'm saying? So many people out here, when it comes to religion, they always seem to, act like they got the answer. Or they always seem to act like, yo, this is the final and top notch, you feel me, peak of the mountain answer. And at the end of the day, you find out that it's something else that's deeper than the answer that you was just given from them, and it's a scary sight. Sometimes, like the Bible said, you got to do your own research and you got to do your own homework. So if that means you got to go on your own journey, then hey, that's what you got to do. You got to go on your own search and find out for yourself, like, what is religion about? Why is we taught religion? Why is we believing in the religion we believe in? Why is it that, all of this stuff is like it is or how it is? At the end of the day, you shall and will come to your final resting place when it comes to answers. You shall have an answer. You shall get that main answer. And at the end of the day, I think you'll be satisfied with that answer. If you ask me, that's just what let's get from it.
When we think about why people believe the things that they believe, and when we think about, let's say, any ancient cultures or groups of people, when we think back to Mesopotamia, or we think about people kind of wandering about in a world trying to understand how we got here, what we're here for, why was the world created, those kinds of questions tend to be encapsulated by a variety of traditions that are kind of trying to explain, the reality that we're living in. But I think what we'd love for you to talk about is so many religious texts also indicate that there's more than just what we see. There's a different interpretation of this world that we were placed into. And I wonder if you can talk about, from an, kind of a historical perspective, what does it mean when we look into texts, right, that have hints into the possibility that there's other things besides what we just, kind of can see and touch and smell and think about?
Yeah, so religions are not materialist. They're not reductive, and they don't assume that we live in a world that everything is open to us, and we can, like a scientist would assume, right? Um, and that's okay. A lot of scientists are religious. Religion functions in a way that allows us to know that there are things other than science can tell us, like things that are outside of the purview of science. And that's true. Religion does function that way. That's one of its main functions, in my opinion. Here's an anecdote to support what I just said. So one of the things that I found, I do what's called field research, which is ethnography. Let's talk about UFOs. My last 3 books are about that topic. So in the beginning, with the book American Cosmic, I started to write that in 2012, and I didn't believe in UFOs. And once I started to look at the data, about UFOs, I started to meet people who studied UFOs and were scientists and were part of a government program that we now know about. But back then we didn't know about it. Now this blew my mind, right? So here I am studying religion, and I think, you can't. Nothing can surprise me. Like in religion, you see all kinds of things, a man walking on water, miracles, things like this. So I can't be surprised. I was surprised because our US government was basically, they had a program that had been around for a long time. And I was meeting the people who were members of the program, and they believed in UFOs. They studied UFOs, and they had material, that they showed me. I went to New Mexico with Dr. Gary Nolan. We went together. I invited him to go with me. Jeff Kripal wouldn't go with me, by the way. I invited him to go. We were blindfolded, by the way, because we went to a crash retrieval space, alleged. I recognize that, okay, the belief in UFO is a rising belief. And the reason is because now we have science that tells us a lot of things, maybe things that could, tell us religion doesn't have all the answers. But here we have a new form of religion with a new kind of technology, right? So digital technology. And so I started to see the belief in UFOs as a religiosity, a new type of religion. So, it served the function of explaining, what we're dealing with. And for them, it's a lot more complicated than.
Yo, it hit different when she said you believing in UFO is a type of religion. Now that hit different, gang. I ain't gonna lie. And the reason it did is because I never heard nobody explain it like this, but she is a doctor and she's good at what she do. She said that already. But at the end of the day, UFOs and believing in UFOs is, been one of the tales of history. One of the tales of times, and a lot of times they try to confuse that tell of time. A lot of times they try to make that, a fib or make that a story that's unbelievable. And at the end of the day, you can't front your move, gang. If people seen it, if people know what they seen, how the fuck is y'all able to sit up here and tell people, oh, no, you ain't seen this. Oh, no, you don't know what the hell you talking about. Oh, no, UFOs ain't real. Oh, no, aliens ain't real. Look, gang. Now, all of a sudden, we got all these goddamn disclosures happening and coming out. So some got to be real. Something got to be real at the end of the day, right? Ain't no way in hell these people gonna come up with the same stories and ain't none of this real. Ain't no way in hell these people gonna come up and tell you the same details about what they seen flying in the sky and how they was abducted if none of it's real at the end of the day. Because some of these people, they was abducted, they lost memory. Some of them was put in places that they were not or never been around. And at the end of the day, a lot of governmental people, due to the fact they was studying this stuff and due to the fact they was paying big checks, paying the big dollars, the biggest dollars to study these programs or create these programs and have people, special people around the world working these programs, they will cover it up. Why wouldn't they, gang? Right? They don't want this to get out to the world, so why wouldn't they cover it up so they can continue to study and pay? Now, she said they was blindfolded, and then if y'all notice, everybody always use that alleged word. Why is that alleged word always tossed around? We ain't got to lie about it. That's the point right now. That's why everybody in the situation they in now. too many people be lying about life. You feel me? They lie about the situations at hand, and then you get put in a situation that you weren't even prepared to be put in or placed in. Now you like, damn, I gotta feel my way about this shit. It's hard to get about that fiddle once you tell that fib, gang. I ain't gonna lie to you. But we see it's taking place right now in the world, in the community. We see what's happening with the government, right? Our government is doing that very same thing to us and the president. I mean, what else can you say? But, you know, just to know that how deep they'll go to cover this stuff. They blindfold y'all, but they'll still take y'all to the crash retrieval site. The retrieval site, I mean, but they'll blindfold you though, just to make sure you don't know the route there. You don't know, man, shit. If you was a good astrologer or something, if you was a good, you know, sky reader, you would look right up in the sky and be able to tell exactly where you are. At the end of the day, though, let's continue, gang.
Then it appears to be, because the people who do look into UFOs, like Dr. Gary Nolan or the person that we went with that was part of this program, you know, they have various beliefs about life because of what they study. And obviously the cosmos, like, you know, what's out there. Well, obviously now, you know, something that may not be extraterrestrial, but is definitely not human.
Let's explore a little bit more. Something that is not extraterrestrial, but not human. What can you say about the government programs and what you experienced in New Mexico?
I was doing ethnography, which means that you meet people who believe these things. And then I was recruited in a sense into the group that studied this topic. And the reason I was recruited was because, by the way, this is the same group that Gary Nolan had talked to him as well, was because I had a whole database of historical accounts of aerial phenomena that had similar patterns. You could say that the patterns matched with modern day reports of UFOs. So I was investigating communities of people who believe in UFOs. I was able to meet people who were involved in a government program who studied UFOs. And so, yeah, so I was invited out there. They invited me, by the way, because, and by the way, it's in my book, American Cosmic. Tyler is the person. James was Dr. Gary Nolan. I didn't use their names. They didn't want their names known. Since that time, Gary Nolan has said, yes, that's me in Diana's book. So I was invited to go to New Mexico to an alleged crash site. I finally went. I put it off for a couple of years, by the way, because it was weird. And I thought, do I really want to go there? So I asked my colleague who was in religious studies to go with me, and he said, what? He said, that's out of my comfort zone. So I asked Dr. Gary Nolan, and he wanted to go like today. And so I learned more about Tyler and what he did and his position. And I learned that the government was studying UFOs. It was shocking to me, to tell you the truth. I didn't know this. But I still didn't believe in UFOs. So it was a couple of years later that, that this belief and evidence for it started to sink in. And I was like, okay, I believe in this now, but I believe in it in a different way. And I'm not advocating belief. So I'm still a religious studies professor. I am not going to say everyone believe in UFOs. The government, in my opinion, doesn't know what they are. And the reason they came to me was to try to get more data about what they are. And so we have people now in Congress, representatives who are saying they believe they're interdimensional. Maybe, I don't know. But I can say that there are definitely pattern matches between what we would call in the past things associated with aerial phenomena and things today. So some people, like there's Dr. Lakatsky, who has studied UFOs and is in the government and was part of one of these programs. He was the head of a UFO government program. And he's talked about things associated with UFO events that appear to be, he calls them paranormal. So they appear definitely to be supernatural and so forth, which then has crossover with these kinds of events when you see them in religious studies and the historical record.
Can you give us an example of interdimensional or non-physical beings that are interacting with consciousness. Like, what does that mean? And I know that, it's not your job to explain atomic structure or, fields of consciousness, but what do you think that means? And I guess how does it relate to what you know from, let's say, other religious texts? Is the connection that there are, references in religious texts to things that are similar, or do these things not intersect?
There are things in religious texts that intersect. So when you do look at the history of angel contact events, let's call them, in the history of Judaism and Christianity, these are the religions I know best. What you see that they do not look like Renaissance paintings of angels. Okay. So they don't look like the people who have European features and have wings and flowing robes and so forth. Sometimes they look like people in two instances in the Bible, but for the most part, they look different, in which sometimes they're described as balls of light. Sometimes they are just described as light. So take someone like Joan of Arc. Okay, so most people know who Joan of Arc is. She's a saint in the Christian tradition. And when she was 15, she was in her father's garden. And she had an experience where a ball of light showed up. She didn't know what it was, and it talked to her. So a lot of people have experiences in modern day UFO experiences. They do have experiences that are just like this. Okay. So there are other types of things like aerial phenomena. Like in the Catholic tradition, I wrote a book about the doctrine of purgatory. And so I went through archives of the Catholic Church, and I found a lot of archive records that described beings from purgatory, souls from purgatory, and how Catholics would then try to pray that they go back into purgatory. Oftentimes, though, things happen to Catholics that they couldn't understand. And so these are, I wrote these down.
Now, she just went deep. She went deeper than anybody else I know that explained religion. Even the pastor, I ain't gonna lie. Sometimes the pastors don't even be knowing what they're talking about half the time. They don't. Because sometimes when you listen to a pastor, they always preach from a point of that's the finalized point. That's it. That's grand finale. That's what they do. When I hear a pastor preach, that's what they always say. They preach from a point of grand total. You understand? Like, this is it and this is. I truly feel like it'll never be it. No, I feel like due to the fact science is still growing and learning, I feel like due to the fact the universe is still constantly growing, I don't believe there ever be a it or a all. You understand what I'm saying? So why do we listen to those type of people? Those type of people right there, the pastors, for the main reason, in fact, them motherfuckers should not be listened to at all. They don't even know the grand finale or anything. They're not totalizing anything up for us. You feel me? When it comes to Bible scripts, when it comes to Jesus, when it comes to our Creator, they don't give us enough information. But I find out when we do our own research and when we dive deep into our own, individualization of ourselves and our religions, that's within ourselves and what we believe. Because honestly, what you believe, it hits you in the soul. It hits you somewhere where you can feel it, honestly. You understand what I'm saying? It hits you. But all the other bullshit that they be talking about, that shit don't even hit. It don't stick at all, man. It really don't.
Because these were outside of the framework of their beliefs. So they would experience things like flying houses. They would call them flying houses, or balls of light that were flying. And they would then think of these as in different ways, basically. So that happens today. So people look up, now they see, of course, are they drones? Are they planes? What are these things? But a lot of times they don't know what they are. But when people have experiences, say in the 1960s, of UFOs, they know, they said it was a big shiny ball of light. It looked like it was all on fire. Often there are little beings associated with these crafts. Sometimes there aren't, often there are. And you can see this in the Catholic historical record too. If you look at another saint, in fact, this is a doctor of the church, Teresa of Avila. So she also had an experience that confused her at first. She saw a being that was about 3 feet tall, and she describes it this way. And we know this because we have her autobiography. And she discussed it as being real, not imaginary. A lot of the interaction of these beings with these people that have these experiences appears in their minds. So they have what would I think would be like telepathic communication with them. They don't see their mouths move, but they hear what they have to say in their minds. So again, you see this also with modern day reports of UFOs. You see this in the Catholic historical record.
If I'm going to connect these dots, right? And this is very compelling to me. One of the things that you have access to as a professor of religious studies, right, and as an expert in these sort of texts is you have the ability to take information that we might call sightings of experiences that people have had over thousands of years and see what the similarities are to people who are now experiencing things that if we were living thousands of years ago might sound a lot like the descriptions in many of these religious texts. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely correct.
It's so fascinating because, you know, for so many of us, the foundations, even if we're not religious people, the foundations of our culture and the storytelling, you know, there's so many aspects of revelation, of miracles, right? Of all of these things that we really want to put in the past, right? That was for those crazy primitive religious people. They didn't know anything about the modern world. And, oh, they thought that God created lightning, but we actually know what lightning is, right? Or we know why earthquakes happen. So you have people with a set of explanations for something that what you're able to do is say, wait a second. If we look at these descriptions and also the meaning that we ascribe to them, we start to see that there may be one universal pattern, right, that we're seeing. And it just depends on the era, you know, what's culturally acceptable and what's intellectually appropriate to describe.
It's so easy to become a podcaster with Riverside. First, go to Riverside and open an account. When you're ready to record, just hit rec to capture high-quality audio and video.
Yes. So you can also see pushback in history and today that shows that when people have these experiences, they describe them, but then people that like to interpret these experiences change the interpretation so that they domesticate them so that they're less scary.
Have we been seeing aliens for thousands of years?
I think to call them aliens is just to use another descriptor.
So what word would you like to use?
Right. Okay. So we lose a lot in interpretation, in the way in which we translate the experience into a framework that people can understand. So today, and so what I do in my work, which is hard to describe, because on the one hand, people don't like to be told about their religion from they don't like to be told that, no, your religion is really not about that. All right. So we have to rethink religion and we have to rethink aliens because people have grown up with Star Wars. They've grown up with Star Trek. They already have in their minds what aliens are about. They're not like that. So if you actually start to look into the cases, you'll see that they look completely different. If you look into angel cases of angel contact events like Teresa, like the big ones, the ones that we see all over when we Google angel and all the Renaissance paintings come up. By the way, those Renaissance artists are using Eros, the cherub is Eros, the Greek gods and goddesses. They're using those artistic conventions to portray something that they looked at and they were like, what is this person talking about? They didn't know how to represent it.
Well, and historically, the angelic representations, at least in the Old Testament, vary tremendously. And the kind of images that many of the prophets experienced, which were under either sleep or trances or meditative states, those were very trippy, for lack of a better word. It's like, it's a creature with 4 faces. What? Right? Like,
Yeah,
like it's
exactly.
got the
Yeah.
head of a lion and the body of a bird. What? Like that's that's outside of many people's kind of realm of understanding. But I think the thing that is sort of fascinating to me is how many things have formed.
Go ahead. Hey, she funny as hell, gang. She said it's the creature with 4 faces. Dog, the shit hilarious. Like, for real, she be funny. But everything they touching bases on is true, though. I mean, I don't give a fuck what y'all believe in. I know what I believe in, and what she talking about is the truth. We could have been seeing aliens for years and never knew that. All these times and all these years, we could have been seeing aliens all this time, and nobody would have ever known. Because at the end of the day, what they shown us, what they described to aliens to us to be, from all these alienistic ass movies, they showed us the shape and format of an alien that we think they should look like. Therefore, we don't know what they look like when we see them, Dodo. If you think the aliens look like big heads and shit, oh, the doctor just said they look like humans. They look like humans. And nobody ever gonna believe that they look like humans. Son, let's get back into it, gang.
Our historical understanding and our cultural understanding of the nature of reality for thousands of years, that may just be a difference in nomenclature and perspective, right? Like, I can't imagine, and I've, been through the Old Testament many a time, I can't imagine incorporating what I think about UAPs into my understanding of traditional text. But your book is incredibly compelling, and this line of research is incredibly compelling, because what you're asking us to do is kind of re-examine our definition of, what is sane.
Mind the Alex Breakdown is supported by Cove Pure.
It's America's 250th birthday, and there are so many wonderful things that we can celebrate about what it means to be an American. And one of them that is most important to me is freedom. And it brings us to a conversation about what we're free to choose. If Flint, Michigan taught this country anything, it's that the government's word on, for example, your water is worth pretty much nothing. Flint wasn't a one-off. The problem is everywhere. And that's why Jonathan and I have switched to Cove Pure to Pure.
Damn, man. Flint water, yup. Flint water show ain't changed. Still dirty water over there. I ain't gonna lie, I think it's still dirty water over here in Wisconsin too, gang. I'm not gonna front my move. They won't shut down all the schools because they talking about they gotta clear out the lid and shit like that, man. They was lying their ass off. You know how many schools? Y'all might well shut down all the houses too to clear out the lid. Make that shit make sense. You feel me? The only way you can do that is if you fully shut down the city, my nigga, for all the oldest buildings that got lead pipes still in there, that's still carrying the lead pipes. Now, the bullshit they tell us is, oh, okay, look, check this out. We got to shut this down, shut the schools down. Motherfucker, you ain't got to do all that. All you got to do is, like I said, tell the city, look, we're going to need a month or two. We're going to shut half the city down. We got to shut the buildings down. We got to replace all the fucking lead pipes with the plastic PCP pipes, gang, the new ones. That's it. That's all. All the other line shit they be doing. Come on, man.
What do religious leaders have access to that maybe we don't? Is there a way that we can acquire skills with which to then see these things? I mean, Jonathan and I spoke to Lorna Byrne, who, since she was a child, experienced, I mean, she describes them as, kind of bits of light, but she said it's more about what it feels like when she experiences them, which many people think sounds crazy, right? She can call them angels, but I guess I'm wondering, are there people who are more susceptible to being able to have access to whether it's angels, whether it's non-human intelligence or different dimensions. What's your perspective kind of historically about who has access to that? And I think Joan of Arc's a great example, right? I also think of, all of the witches and Salem and, women historically who were seen as a threat because they perceived things that other people couldn't perceive. For many centuries, right? Women were persecuted for being midwives because they seemed to have a knowledge that was threatening in some way. How do you see this sort of lining up historically?
Well, first, if you look at it from the perspective of all the religions, right? So you take a lot of the religions and you place them side by side, you get to see these patterns. And so in every traditional religious tradition, you do have people who have what I would call a cultivated interior sense or cultivated spiritual sense. And within the Christian and even the Jewish traditions, this was thought to be a real thing. Okay, that it came. A lot of people had it. It would like come alive in adolescence, like when you're about 11 or 12, and then it would be cultivated, right? And some people would have it like, how some people are good athletes and some people are not as good, right? They have gifts. Some people would have it more than other people. And those were the people who were thought, they would be a prophet, a spokesperson of God, an oracle in the Greek time period. That's, they would be oracles and so forth. So yes, so we still have these people, by the way. Today, sadly, they don't have a place. So if they're in secular society, and even in certain religious societies, this is another thing that I say that people don't like to hear, that a lot of religious traditions have become secularized. So if you look at like certain Christian denominations and so forth, their belief system is similar to the belief system of the secular culture. They don't believe in angels. They don't believe, even though their text says that angels exist, and the doctrine probably of their churches say that angels exist. No. That was maybe in the first century, angels appeared, but no, not anymore. So that's a secularization process that's happened. So those folks who have the internal sense, the interior sense, now when they have these things that they see, they could call them aliens, UFOs, extraterrestrials, angels. I know people in the same family who have had an experience. One used to be an atheist and now is an agnostic, but calls it a plasma being. And the other is Catholic and she calls it an angel. So still, even within the same household, you can have a different interpretation of what this type of thing is. And so those people are now, they think, am I crazy? So it's a really sad situation for people with a developed interior sense.
What do you think the purpose is of certain people being given this kind of interior sense? What does that do for us as a people?
So in order to answer that question, I always like to go back to the writings of Socrates and Plato. Plato was Socrates' student, and Socrates never wrote anything. As we said earlier, he critiqued writing. And he critiqued it because he said that it could impede your direct connection to something that he called the good, which early Christians later interpreted as God. Okay, so they were very impacted and influenced by Socrates and the writings of Plato. So Plato comes along, and so he wants to preserve the wisdom of Socrates. So he writes these dialogues. So in Socrates' time, he believed, and in fact, he created a homeschool, basically. So he looked around and he said, wow, the kids of Athens, they're really not getting a good education. So he created the School of Athens. And so what he did was he taught them philosophy. Now, philosophy, we tend to think of it in a certain way. But if you go back to Socrates, philosophy was literally a love of knowledge. It was a direct access to knowledge. And so this was something that was a charismatic situation. So he was having a mystical experience of the good, and he was trying to train young people to do that. Now, why? he wrote a book called The Republic, and it was about justice. And his question was this: could we live in a society of justice? His answer doesn't seem to be yes, by the way, but his answer is basically this: if we have people who are philosophers, not the kind today, and sorry, philosophers, not the kind that teach you about, ethics and so forth. No, people like Socrates who are directly hooked in to knowledge of the good, therefore they know good from bad. They know how to act. They know how to be moral. And do good acts and so forth. So this is the answer to your question. There's a type of knowledge that's a moral knowledge that you could see it existing in religions. Oftentimes when a prophet comes along, the hierarchy of whatever tradition doesn't want to listen to them, suppresses them and so forth. Socrates, in fact, was killed by the people of Athens for corrupting the youth when he was actually obviously not doing that. And then you can see this throughout time too.
What do we know about the Catholic Church and what it knows about extraterrestrial or UFO, whatever we want to call them? Is the Vatican withholding information?
Okay, so that's a question that's always asked of me, and this is my answer. So first, I don't think so. So I'm not a representative of the Catholic Church. I am Catholic, and I've been studying Catholicism my whole life. So I would say, and I've been to the Vatican archives, and I also went to the observatory and spent some time with Brother Guy, Consul Manu invited me to stay there for a bit. All right, so the question is the Vatican, do they know anything about UFOs? Are they hiding something? No, in my opinion, no. Okay. And this is why I say that. First off, you have to understand that the Vatican is not secularized. Okay. They are not, if they do see something that is, like what we've been talking about they're going to interpret it as from a religious standpoint. They're not going to interpret it from a this is an extraterrestrial. They won't know that, right? So there's a lot of things that happen to Catholics, the Vatican, like apparitions of the Virgin Mary and so forth, things that look miraculous. They send envoys out to check it out, and they spend a lot of time studying it. But I don't think that they have things that they're hiding. I think that they would invite people to know that God is great, incomprehensibly great, and that God could create lots of different types of life in the universe, and that's not incompatible with Catholic theology.
Interesting. So Catholic theology, believing in multiple types of life in the universe, would incorporate a non-human intelligence, and the existence of that.
Yes, and in fact, they have. So if you look at a very famous man, Thomas Aquinas, so he created scholasticism, which was a medieval focus, by the way, on Aristotle's work. So, he went back to the Greeks too. He discovered it in the tradition, and he revised it. It's a theology of angels and theology of fallen angels, and a theology of things that we just don't understand that happen to human beings on Earth, things that might possibly be extraterrestrial, but he didn't say yes or no to that. He said, God can do anything, right? So we just don't know. So always in that tradition, you'll see the possibility and the recognition that the Creator can do anything that, the Creator wants, back to Job. So,
and I truly believe that. No, I believe on it. Because if you know your Creator, like I know my Creator, our Creator is one amazing Creator, one amazing God. You understand what I'm saying? Our Creator can do anything under the universe shoe, under the universe heel of the universe shoe. He can do anything, or she can do anything, however you choose to look at it. Because I know some of y'all like to title and label things, right? But our Creator can do anything there is that you can think of, even when you give up, even when you gave up, even when you feel defeated, even when you feel like you lost and you done lost all you can lost. No, you haven't, because if you just bow down and you gave all your fights and your battle to the Creator, it is already won. I can't lie to you. It is already done. That's how amazing our God is. And I do understand what she said. I understand that message. I overstand that message, actually. So much that I hope a lot of y'all out there understand, overstand, and understand that message. Because, when you think about it, gang, we are still discovering new life forms every day. Every day, we are still discovering new life forms of different species. We are still discovering new planets. The universe is still growing. The universe is still growing at a rapid pace. You understand? It don't take you to be in school for years to understand this. All you got to do is shit. Nowadays, you can pop on YouTube, or you can pop on a nice educational podcast or an educational channel of some sort on the internet, and I guarantee you're gonna get all the answers you're looking for. Because look, like I said, they like to keep you from these answers, but these answers are out there, and all it takes is for us to do our research and really, you feel me, like really with intentions, with the greatest intentions, not the most negative intentions, but the greatest intentions, really want to find true answers and really come down to the truth about life and our existence and your purpose. You understand what I'm saying?
So there is, though, within the Catholic tradition, a very sophisticated history and theology of non-human intelligence, and also the interior sense. That's not taught, by the way. I mean, I went to Catholic school. It's not taught in the Catholic school. It's not taught unless you specialize in it at Catholic University. It's not really taught there either. So that's another secularization process, even though the Vatican is not secular.
One of the things that we've encountered, in a variety of individuals we've spoken to, whether they be physicists or yogis or deep meditators, there's something that happens when you're in a particular mental state, for lack of a better expression. And we kind of know a bit more about the neurophysiology and kind of the neuroanatomy of which parts of the brain, tend to be upregulated or downregulated when we are, in a certain meditative state. And we know about theta waves, and we know all these things. And I wonder if there's also something to, when you talk about people having some sort of intrinsic, knowledge or access to this kind of information, is it possible that, over thousands of years, religions have tried to find different ways, right, to have access to these states that we now know place you in a position to receive a different kind of information, to receive information that is more intuitive, maybe information that is in some senses like interdimensional, meaning it's beyond, sort of this XYZ, sort of, vector system. Is it possible, that that's kind of what people who are experiencing these, other beings or, access to kind of other kinds of interaction, is that what people are possibly tapping into? And is this then its own kind of new religion, without the structures that have been in place for thousands of years?
It could be that, definitely. I do agree with you that people are accessing a certain part of their brain when they're having these experiences. And you do see in the history of religions, different techniques by different types of religions. Like Hinduism has yoga. Yoga literally means practice. And there are hundreds of different types, if not thousands of different types of yogas in order to access this part of, this interior state, which, in the Christian tradition, there's prayer, obviously. Sufis in Islam, they have a dance that they do in order to access this. So in all of the different traditions, there's this place, this kind of category called mysticism. And mysticism is what I talked about, that Socrates was able to have. Now, the thing about Socrates' community was they wanted your physiology to be good. So they were athletic. They ate only certain types of things. So they were super healthy people. You see this in different religious traditions. In certain religious traditions, you can't drink. You have to, you can't even have coffee in some, or tea. So there, you have to get your physiology. In Buddhism, is true. I have a friend who went to a Buddhist monastery, and she thought she was going to learn about, the Buddhist texts and so forth, Dhammapada or something like that. But instead, they basically made all of the novice monks go on a fast and basically, clean up their bodies so their bodies can tune in to this. So it is a physiological thing that's happening.
You mentioned that the Catholic Church removed aspects of teaching about the inner world and the notion of extrasensory perceptions or extra senses. Do you have a sense of why that is? There's a theory, obviously, that it was control. If they had direct access to this type of information, then maybe they didn't need the structure of the church. What's your perspective on why some of that teaching was removed?
What websites your competitors don't want you to know? Part two.
Yeah, I'm not conspiratorial about it. So I don't think that, the hierarchy was like, let the people be, not connected to God. I don't think that that's the idea. I think that it's a secularization process. So as the cultures after the 1700s and 1750, the Enlightenment, after this happened in Europe, it impacted every single religion. And so, science then became the dominating ideology, you could say. And so it, and people started to change their faith, not necessarily lose their faith, but certainly the idea that the teaching of the spiritual senses, you can't see this sense. We didn't, when I said earlier that it's now that we can actually say, oh, look, parts of the brain do this. Now we can see that. We were able to see that 30 years ago. We weren't able to see that 50 years ago. People just didn't believe in it because they didn't see it. It's like, things that people didn't think we could go to the moon. People didn't think we could go into space because that's crazy. People didn't think we could fly. Look what happened to the Wright brothers, right? So, yeah, so these kinds of things are it's just a matter of time. So now that we have more access to understanding that, where we can see the brain and see when it lights up and when it doesn't, and identify what kinds of practices help gray matter, right? Then we can associate those with those practices. So the mystical practices have been super important, destabilizing, right, to the hierarchy, true. But I think that it's just a process. I do know people, and I'm in agreement with this, who believe that there will be a revival of religion, and the reason is because of science, because we can.
Now, a revival of a religion is different. I never heard of that, but I believe that too. I got to, because when you think about it, a lot of us is tapping into a different consciousness, a different state of being in the mind. You understand what I'm saying? A lot of us is tapping into areas we never really tapped into. A lot of us is believing much different. A lot of us got the belief of a God now, or even an angel. You feel me? Even if you believe in something so strong, to me, that's belief of an angel or a God. Because look, on the planet we live on right now, in the country you and I both live in the state you live in, and in the state I live in, we are all forced to believe in nothing other than negativity, drama, hatred. Definitely, if you my color, gang, I ain't gonna lie to you. If you my skin color, then it speaks for itself. If you of the Mexican descendant, then you already know what's up. You already know the same thing, right? We are looked down on, and I ain't making this a race war thing, but at the end of the day, we got to start there, right? Because we're going to end up somewhere great. Now, right, we are on a planet and in a country where belief is not one of the things that's promoted. Motivating yourself or gassing yourself up is not motivated or promoted. Showing your shine is not motivated or promoted. Definitely not in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I can't lie to you right now. So many people around my city, around my state, they disbelieve. And like she said, people only believe when they see. And that's the saddest thing. And I think that's what it is with God. I asked somebody, like a few months ago, when you pray, where do you send your prayers? Where do you send your prayers to? Do you know what they said? Do you know what they said? They don't know. They just pray and hope, it get heard and whatever. And I'm like, what the fuck is hey, hold on. Because at the end of the day, that's not a fucking answer at all. I mean, you just sending hopeless prayers up to the middle of nowhere. Bitch, for all we know, you could be sending them to the devil. You know what I'm saying? At the end of the day, you got to know that with intention shall you utilize this energy, and with intention shall you utilize what's in you. That's why she said Plato's was teaching about inner self-learning. Everybody that learned to live in the quietness in the quietness nobody want to be in the quietness of their own mind. Nobody want to be in that. Don't nobody want to hear their own thoughts rolling all day and shit. Some of them thoughts fucking with them and telling them to do this and hey this and you shouldn't do that, or you a bad motherfucker, you fucked up. And you know what that is? That's your ego thinking, man. That's your human ego. Your ego getting the best of you or is kicking your ass. Whichever way it is, you letting it take you. You gotta bulk up and you gotta learn how to own yourself, own your own inner self thinking. You feel me? Start feeling. Stop thinking with your mind and start feeling. What is it that you feel? Do you feel this resonate with you? Do you feel like you're safe? Do you feel okay with what's taking place? Do you feel everything is fine? Not do you think, because I'm gonna tell you something, you can be indecisive. You can think, yeah, everything okay, and then the next second you can be like, nah, you know what? I changed my mind. When you feel something, you feel it. Your feelings ain't gonna change. Your feelings always gonna stay the same. When you feel something is that, it's that. When you feel something is out of order, it's that. My nigga, ain't nothing gonna change about it being out of order. The only thing that's gonna change is the thought process of your motherfucking human mind, your ego trying to tell you, oh man, it ain't cool. That's your mind trying to logically figure out or put together this puzzle piece that ain't even a fucking puzzle to put together because your gut already gave you the feeling. You understand what I'm saying? So here it is, your big-headed ass mind doing its job, a predictive engine. That's what a brain does. A brain is a predictive engine for those of y'all that do not know. It likes to predict everything that makes you comfortable. You understand what I'm saying? That's why everybody loves sitting and being comfortable, doing the same thing every day. And I don't think nobody ever paid attention to it. So in order to train your brain, you got to be willing to change the routine of your life every day, every second if need be, every second if need be. I ain't gonna lie. You will get comfortable with being comfortable and then start to wonder why you're not growing. You will get comfortable with being comfortable in the same position and spot you are in, and then starting to wonder why you're not going to the top or why everything is not working out for you. Once you start doing that, then those become complaints. Those become negative energies. Those become negative energies that get turned into and compressed into frequencies and frequency waves that get sent into the universe. And once they sent into the universe, then the universe got to pick up on them and create this event for you to, experience in reality. You understand what I'm saying? So one thing you got to get comfortable doing is being uncomfortable. You got to get comfortable being uncomfortable, because at the end of the day, uncomfortability will take you to your success lane, and it'll take you to the line of your success race, and also it'll help you win. Yeah, being uncomfortable, because every time you're uncomfortable, you want to shift something into comfortability. Every time you're uncomfortable, you want to change something around you to make it comfortable. And look, if every time you uncomfortable at everything and with everything, then shall you change everything in your life until you succeed. Make it make sense. It just made sense. It made its own sense. I ain't even got to make it make no more sense, because Dr. Shorty Wop right here, she made the most sense. You hear me? She made the most sense. I'm just piggybacking off what she said. So at the end of the day, you got to understand that belief is powerful. Positivity is powerful. Negativity, sometimes they try to overrule, but nothing overrules love. Nothing overrules love. I don't care what you're talking about. Nothing overrules love, gang. That's why our creator win, God win. You hear me? Let's keep going.
Can now see the benefits that people have by doing religious practice.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could go in a lot of different directions. And I think obviously prayer and meditation, those are really important components. And we absolutely know, the benefits of that. I think a lot of people, though, are also very, very intimidated by the politicization of religion and the numerous conflicts, even just in our lives right now, that in many cases center around religious differences. There's a lot of people who are specific in their not wanting to believe that aligning with one particular side or one particular practice gains you access, let's say, to riches in the next world, or a reprieve from purgatory, or from forgiveness of sins. I think there's a lot of complexity to that. But I think actually, I just read an article today about the increase in participation in Catholic Church.
I think a lot of people are looking for religiosity without the politicalization of religion. And how do you get that? Right? How do you get the benefits of the practice, of the structure of the community, of the impact of prayer? We know, and we've spoken to people who are studying it, like Anna Yusum and Lisa Miller, who are focused on how our spiritual world and cultivating a spiritual world through the religious practice of prayer and connection increases our resilience, increases our life quality, decreases depression, reduces anxiety.
I don't see how religion can't be political. So if you look at in the past, to people who we wouldn't say were religious now, because we have assumptions about religion, but who were religious. So we're talking about Socrates. I mean, he was so effective at what he was doing. He was killed by Athens, right, for treason against the government. You do have what's happening with the Pope and Donald Trump today, having a fight over the war in Iran. And I love Lisa's work, by the way, in The Awakened Brain. So once people start to do that, they're going to feel, compelled to say things that will be interpreted to be political, because they will say, no, this isn't right, or that's right. I don't think you can actually get around that. And I actually think that's good. I do think so, because I think that the more people that act in ways that, initiate this type of brain state, you could call it, or, thing that is a hookup, like Socrates said, to the good, I think the better off all of humanity would be. But you're going to have a lot of people who are going to, be political because of their, like Martin Luther King. Basically, this is a good example. He called out people for following laws that were unjust. He said, this is not just. There is a natural law. If Martin Luther King were to be on a desert island, he was actually asked this question. What book would he bring? He would bring Plato's Republic. So that says something about, how Christians are influenced by this book.
I want to circle back to some of the other ways and the overlaps between either religious historical experience and what people are experiencing as UFOs in the modern time. I was also thinking about, this notion of purgatory, Mayim, as you mentioned, like I'm not a religious scholar, so there's a lot I don't know, but like from what I do, it seems like purgatory and being abducted have this weird similarity in description where you're taken and evaluated. Is there an overlap or similarity from your perspective?
You love building high-performing websites, but you don't love having to chase content, coding plug.
Yeah. So first, I want to just make a comment about the political aspects of religion. So this, in fact, was what got me interested in looking at the topic of alien abduction and, UFOs, modern day reports of UFOs. So I wrote a book about the doctrine of purgatory, which has seen a decline in people practicing devotions to souls in purgatory. So young Catholics today, for the most part, don't do that, whereas Catholics 40 years ago would do that. So I wanted to find out what was the decline. Why did that happen? And part of what I did was I went to, like I said, archives, Catholic archives around the world, and I looked at reports of souls from purgatory that people believed that they were encountering and things like that. And so I started to see the similarities. I actually didn't see them at first. I just took notes. So they described them first, and then they provided a framework of interpretation. So here's an example. There was a nun in France. She was in her cell, and a light would come down from the sky, would penetrate the wall of her cell and come into her room. And she was like, "What's this?" And she would tell the head of the convent, and they said, "We don't believe you." Well, this happened so many times that finally the Mother Superior said, "Okay, I'm going to stay up with you and we're going to look at this and see what this is." And so she saw it also. So you already have the description before you have the interpretation. So what happens?
No, that hit different, gang. That hit different. She got out there. She said, "I'm gonna stay up with you, and I'm gonna witness this. I'm gonna witness this myself, right? You got to be a bad mama jamma if you want to witness seeing these type of spirits and these type of beings. You understand what I'm saying? But I guess to get the full report and to get it documented or to get this stuff on file, you got to do what you got to do. You really got to, you know what I'm saying? You got to be able to be a witness, to be able to attest to this, to be able to have your testimony also. It was like the people that was with Jesus. It was 12 disciples. They was able to all speak. They was able to all give their side, their version of the story, because you got to believe this. All 12 of them did not see the same thing. Even though all 12 of them was with Jesus at that moment. Say if I got 12 people around me, right? And you one of the 12 people, right? All y'all around me in a circle. I'm in the middle. All of y'all see different sides of me. That's the side of the story you're going to tell. So if I throw something and I got Dave in the front of me and you in the back of me, you ain't going to see what I threw. You're just going to see the hand motion from behind. So your story going to be like, well, I seen him throw something, but I did not know what it was. I seen the back of him. I was behind him. Dave's story is going to be, well, I seen him throw something. I was in front of him, and what he threw, it was a large silver object in his hand, and it had a sharp end on it. And he threw about this far, it landed, and it hit this. You see what I'm saying? So it's going to be two different sides. It's going to be two different stories, just like it's two different sides to a coin. It's a head side and it's a tail side. Just like it's two sides to every story. It's a truth, it's a lie, and then it's a story. Just like it's hot to cold. Motherfucker, I was finna take y'all back to school. You understand what I'm saying? But I ain't gonna do that. Anyway, all of this shit make a lot of sense, gang, when you think about it, because you gotta understand, like, that's why she said they're trying to do the teachings and they're trying to teach people from a different perspective. Everybody got a different understanding of what an alien is, or UFO or UAP. You better believe the newer kids, the generation nowadays that don't even know nothing about aliens or UAPs and UFOs, is finna think something totally different than what we did when we was a kid too. Goddamn. You were saying. So I can agree, pretty much everything she's saying in this bitch, I'm agreeing with, again, because like I said, the doctor, she got the answers, and I don't just believe her because her title says she's a doctor and that automatically means she know truth. No, what she's saying actually fit the bill. Is resonating with my soul. It ain't resonating with my mind. It ain't resonating with my thoughts. It's resonating with my soul. It's hitting different, because now what I'm seeing in the world myself and what I'm experiencing internally, yeah, it makes sense.
Was that the Mother Superior says this must be a soul from purgatory. So the whole group of nuns, all of the nuns at the convent, for 3 days, they prayed this soul back into purgatory, and this stopped the.
But why would they automatically think it's a soul from purgatory? Is it because they never was taught about this? Could that be the case?
The situation with the nun.
Sorry, for those of us who aren't super skilled in understanding purgatory. So you see a light that's in your room and it's like coming through walls and it's freaking you out.
It's not just a light flashing. It's not like a light bulb wire situation. It's like coming through the wall.
I'm picturing like Glinda the Good Witch before she manifests, in
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
So I'm
Yeah.
sorry. So why and I understand that this doesn't have to be truth with a capital T, but for this group of nuns, why would the assumption be that it was a soul from purgatory? Why couldn't it be an angel from heaven?
Because if it was an angel from heaven, it would behave differently because it would announce itself. There's a cultural framework in place. It's like what we know when we sit down to have dinner, we have ways of eating, right? We don't just grab our food with our hands. And
My thing is this, though. My thing is this. How would they know it would behave different? Who taught us, the behaviors of a soul from purgatory and an angel? You know what I'm saying? Who's doing the teaching? Now, she said it's cultural backup and it's cultural facts behind this, but where's these facts at? I ain't never seen it. And that's why I feel like shit, the people of the world, we don't know half as much as we think we know. We think we know everything. They ain't telling us everything. They leaving us out. They leaving us out to dry half of the damn information about the God and the creator. You know what I'm saying? The person that created us. We want to know all this shit too. If y'all able to know, we want to know too. You feel me? Damn. Let's go.
and smash it in our face.
I had Ethiopian food last night and I did eat with my hands.
Okay. So we don't usually do that. So the thing is that nobody tells you that. There's no handbook of how to eat dinner, right? We just learn it from the people around us. So it's a cultural framework that's already in place. They are already aware of what angels are like.
Okay, got it. So this is not behaving like a typical angel, as it were. And so the idea, and I'm asking legitimately because I don't know. The idea is that like this is like a soul or something that needs to go back to where it's supposed to be. Did it have a negative connotation? Meaning like, did it feel bad and that's why it's purgatory related?
Well, it appears that she didn't want it in her cell at night. And so because they didn't know what it was, they just thought it was a soul from purgatory. And so they prayed and it went away. So that reinforced their interpretation. So you do have these kinds of things. So people do see things. Often they need to explain them, right, to themselves or to others. And so they go with an explanation that is like a cultural framework. Today it would be a UFO. Well, that was a UFO or something like that, or an alien. That's how people interpret it today. But so from this kind of research that I did, I then had this big list of these records. And so I published my book and I was like, wow, I wonder what these are. And I wonder if there's any, there's patterns. So I showed it to a friend of mine and he's the one who said that it looked like, he said, these look like Steven Spielberg films. Like these look like UFOs. And honestly, I thought, no, that can't be true. And so that's how I started to study UFOs.
If we were to go back in history, I'm assuming that there are places in every religious text and in all of these reports for thousands of years of things that, given the cultural framework, were explained in a particular way. But if we look at them from a framework now of, we have a situation where the government itself has admitted that there is research going into beings that we may not understand or experiences that we may not be able to explain. What we have is our cultural conversation now opens up into the one that you're having in the others, right? What is actually going on? And, we're still in the century or so of, an entire movement of science fiction, which many of us grew up reading, or Isaac Asimov, or Orson Scott Card. Like, these are all amazing things that we can imagine. But what if science fiction itself is the cultural framework for a different understanding of what's possible?
Yeah, I think it is actually. And because it's so embedded within our upbringing and our childhood, all of us have seen Star Wars, right? All of us love it. So it's part of our, like, we use the language of Star Wars. We know those kinds of things. Do not try. These kinds of things. So this is, of course. So if we see something, we're going to then automatically look at it from the perspective that science fiction has provided to us.
Okay, before we get more into science fiction, never has this sentence been said. Let's go back to Ezekiel. So, if we were to look at this as an example, and you do talk about this as, one of those texts that if we reread it from a completely different framework, what are we actually experiencing that Ezekiel is writing about? So can you set us up a little bit? Like, who is Ezekiel? We do have extra biblical sources that, like, this, he was a dude who wrote, he was a prophet, very important, obviously. But can you set us up, talk a little bit about some of Ezekiel's visions and how we might be able to re-envision those visions?
Okay, so Ezekiel is a prophet of the Hebrew Bible. Traditionally, he lived in the time period of before what's called 3rd century Judaism, which is going to be what's called Second Temple Judaism. And he's going to be a person who has an experience of, so the tradition that he's in is called the chariot tradition. So in Judaism, in Hebrew, is called the Merkabah tradition, Merkabah being vehicle. Okay. And so this gets translated, say, if you're Greek, into the chariot tradition. So it's the Merkabah tradition. And the Merkabah tradition is a mystical tradition of Judaism, which is a tradition that is about encounters with angels. Okay. And encounters with angels is dangerous. So it's not something that is undertaken lightly. You have to work on your character. And it appears to me, although I don't know this for a fact, I'm not a scholar of Judaism, so I can't authoritatively say that the people who studied in the Merkabah tradition, like Ezekiel, had developed spiritual senses. Like, there wasn't, it's documented that this is going on in the School of Athens, but is it documented that, and by the way, this might be the same time period as Ezekiel.
Yeah, Ezekiel was Babylon era, so even a little bit earlier. And just again, I'm speaking as a lay person. What is known about the prophets of our tradition, and I'm assuming about other traditions as well, is that these were people that weren't like other people, right? Meaning these were people who had access to things that other people didn't. That's why they were prophets, right? And whether it was, let's say, by modern distinction, were they mentally ill? Were they having hallucinations, right? We can place all that on that. When you think about shamans and indigenous, cultures, right? These are people who are separate from the regular people in some way that we may not even understand, right?
Yeah, they definitely are separate. They don't necessarily want to be, though. So, look at Jonah. He did not want the task that he had before him, but he did it anyway because he had to. So they do have, it appears that they have a spiritual sense. And so the access that he has is that he's able to have this experience of, we don't know what it is, but as you described angels earlier in the Hebrew Bible, it looks like it has wings. I think it has 6 wings, and it has, I think, 4 faces, and it's, so it's a certain type of cherub. So I think Thomas Aquinas identified it as a seraphim. All right, so he sees this, okay? And he says that it is like a vehicle. Okay, he's talking about it like a vehicle. It's in the air. It's all on fire. He has a certain feeling about it. In the tradition, so along the same lines, there are other texts within the in Judaism, right, associated with the Hebrew Bible, but are not part of the Hebrew Bible.
Stop scrolling. You are watching the end of being a creator and the beginning of owning creators, because.
And so this would be like the Book of Enoch. and so forth. So you have these extra texts that then go on to inform a tradition of angels and fallen angels. So good angels and bad angels, basically. And this is going to go on to inform early Christianity as well, and the whole Christian tradition. So Ezekiel is a very important book because it is in the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible is authoritative to Christians also. They call it the Old Testament. And so this is something that a lot of people, you can't say, well, none of this happens in our tradition, in the biblical tradition. Well, no, it does actually. And there's a huge extra tradition that is informative to the tradition, but is not necessarily biblical. So that's what makes Ezekiel and his experience important.
In mystical traditions and Kabbalistic traditions, this was a thriving, kind of esoteric information that was not meant for everyone.
No. Yeah. It's dangerous.
Correct. It's very dangerous. And the notion was that it's not dangerous like, oh, we don't want women doing it, which was one of the rules. The notion was that the information about what is on the other side is potentially catastrophic to the human mind. Like that's literally, and that is also true of Plato, of Socrates. These were not things to be taken lightly. Like it's funny, I was talking to my younger son who's 17 and he's studying Plato, and he said the thought that, that we are basically looking at a projection of reality, right? Which is the cave, right? The people in the cave. He said, that kind of freaks me out. And like that essence is why some of this kind of knowledge has been esoteric, right? Or we've dismissed it or we've put it aside. But the notion that, this is obviously what you're an expert in, the notion that we can revisit, right? The pattern of human history, because we haven't been alive long at all in the scope of the universe, whichever interpretation of creation you like. We are barely just here, right? We're barely visiting here. So the notion that we can go back and say, wait a second, there are always things in human history that are outside of our current explanation, understanding, and even consistent access. That's astounding. And what if UAPs, UFOs, these conversations of exceptional sightings, exceptional sensations, exceptional experiences, and a feeling that when this happens, you are never the same. What does it look like in our current vernacular to try and understand that? It's fascinating.
It is fascinating. And it's also happening at a level that is unprecedented. Because if you think about it, it's being projected on screens everywhere. So the United States is disclosing basically Plato's cave, right? It's saying, we're in this cave, the United States government. And so this is really an interesting time, which is why I stuck with it.
Is that how you see it? The government is now in a position to expose the projection of reality that we've all taken as true. But guess what? There's more.
I don't think that so listen, the government is probably unaware of the allegory of the cave, right? Which is also in the Republic. All right. So some people in the government totally know about it, but most of them are not going to know about it. Okay. So, but the position is a powerful position. What's happening because of the infrastructure, the digital infrastructure, is that knowledge is now disseminated. It's decentralized. It's, they can't kill everyone, right? So Athens killed Socrates, right? Got rid of the problem, okay? But look what happened. Writing took off. The dialogues, we still have the dialogues. We read them today. So now we have the internet. Now we have phones that are able to take video of things in the sky, and people are able to upload it on different social media. It gets viral, right? So we've got the ability at this point in time for masses of people to be exposed to the allegory of the cave and what happens when something that's beyond human comprehension, which is what happens to the man who's taken out of the cave and he sees that he was in a cave, and then he's going to think, oh gosh, am I going to go back and they might kill me? No, now we all see it. We're all the audience. We are all in the cave, and we're all being able to document the disclosure of what this man sees when he goes out. And so I think that that's pretty unprecedented. And that's why I say that this is a new form of religion. And I don't mean it in the sense that, and it probably will get political. So when I say that the US government is disclosing now, do I think that they're going to give us the truth, or are they going to give us their truth? So that's where we get to a question. And I think that we're going to see what happens. It could be, beyond, what I
Personally, I think they're gonna give us their truth. I don't think we're gonna get the truth that we all been looking for, right? I just don't. I don't believe that. I just don't. I don't think they never gave us the truth. It's been 80 years and they've been hiding these goddamn aliens for 80 years. They ain't got the truth yet. Come on now. Y'all that shaming yourselves, or y'all that, what is y'all hiding so bad that y'all can't give us the truth out of 80 years? Make this shit make sense. I don't know. At the end of the day, man, that was my time, man. I love everybody that chose to join the video, because you could have been anywhere else. Yeah, your ass could have been anywhere else, but since you my dog, you was over here watching a video with me, watching something I created, supporting your boy, and I definitely appreciate it. Definitely do. At the end of the day, man, I love y'all. I love you, your family. I love everything that you do. I support everything you do. Definitely, if it's on the positive tip and it's on the up and up, and you supporting everybody else around you, then I'm supporting you, gang. Most definitely. You helping everybody else around you, I'm helping you, gang. Most definitely. That's how we're supposed to do. We're supposed to work together and help each other. You feel me? At the end of the day, I will be back with more content, man. I love y'all. Y'all keep your head up. Stay safe. Stay sharp. Share this video. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't. And hit that like button, gang. And if everything I said or everything they said on this video resonate with you, then click that button on the other video right there on the screen. And I'll be back to you guys.